Hi, I'm Zach Krynick. I'm here with John Feffer, Senior Policy Analyst at the Institute for Policy Studies, talking about the killing of Osama bin Laden. Mr. Feffer, what was your initial reaction to the death of Osama bin Laden?
Well, honestly, my first reaction was a sense of relief. I mean, this has been a national obsession for more than a decade. Relief that this is over in terms of that obsession, relief that the operation went successfully, at least according to plan, rather than being bungled. But that was replaced rather quickly with a sense of sadness. And not sadness at the death of bin Laden, of course. I'm not sad that he's gone. He was a terrible man. But sadness that this is the way that the United States realizes justice, that we understand justice more as vengeance, more in our kind of death penalty way of thinking, rather than bringing someone like bin Laden to court, rather than trying him, rather than applying the rule of law as is understood internationally. So that was the sadness that I felt as a kind of second-order emotion.
What questions does the location of bin Laden's hideout, merely several hundred meters from the Pakistan Military Academy, raise? If the U.S. government becomes convinced that elements of the Pakistani Secret Service, the ISI, helped shelter bin Laden, what do you think the response will be?
Well, I think the United States government has been, shall we say, skeptical about cooperation with the ISI for some time, that there's been a belief that there are essentially two factions, perhaps more, but essentially two factions within the ISI, one that cooperates with the U.S. and the other which is not interested in cooperation, which has more sympathy, perhaps not with al-Qaeda, but certainly with the Taliban in Pakistan. And I think that has complicated the relationship with Pakistan, complicated both our intelligence cooperation, but just bilateral relations in general. I think while it's true that, as the president of Pakistan pointed out in the Washington Post this morning, that 85% of Pakistanis have no sympathy whatsoever for al-Qaeda, there is nevertheless strong feelings of sovereignty, that the United States is interfering in the affairs of Pakistan, both through this kind of raid, but also through our rather consistent drone attacks over the last few years. So I think this complicated relationship is only brought into greater relief by this operation. So in some sense, this is, I think, what bin Laden had hoped for. I mean, bin Laden and al-Qaeda were not happy about a relationship between the United States and Pakistan. I mean, they saw Pakistan as a potential country that a Taliban or Taliban-like force could take over. And to drive a wedge between the United States and Pakistan is something that was definitely on their agenda.
What impact do you think bin Laden's death will have on the Afghanistan-Pakistan theater of war?
Well, in the best case scenario, of course, we would say, you know, the war is over, more or less. We defeated Osama bin Laden, we defeated al-Qaeda, we can pack up our bags and we can go home. And I think there are calls in Congress to accelerate the timetable for withdrawal, and I think that's entirely appropriate. On the other hand, a lot of people in the military are saying, look, it wasn't al-Qaeda that we were fighting in Afghanistan. There were only 100 or so al-Qaeda operatives. We were really fighting the Taliban. And you know, this means that they see the war as still ongoing. They see the goal as being establishing some degree of stability in Afghanistan. And they will push probably for maintenance of U.S. troop levels and perhaps even pushing at the timetable a little bit so that large numbers of U.S. troops remain. So I think this will be a big political debate here in the United States, what this means for U.S. troop presence in Afghanistan. I think it's absolutely necessary for peace movement and for others to take this as an opportunity to say, hey, you know, this is our moment. This is our moment to say we can leave. We can leave Afghanistan to the people of Afghanistan.
Considering the symbolic importance of bin Laden's death, do you expect significant domestic and international political reverberations?
Well, the first reverberation that everyone is talking about, of course, is President Obama's chances for a second term. There was a comedian, Andy Borowitz, who wrote on his website, 2012 election canceled. So this is a certain expectation that the killing of Osama bin Laden buoys the Democratic Party's chances in the next election. I don't think that is necessarily true. I mean, obviously, we're going to see a bump up for the president, perhaps for the Democratic Party, in the short term. The long term, it's a little bit hazier. I think that there are going to be reverberations throughout the Muslim world having to do with how the United States operates as a global power. In today's Washington Post, Richard Cohen wrote an op-ed piece, Richard Cohen, who identifies himself usually as a liberal, saying this demonstrates that the United States has to act unilaterally when it must. And all this talk of multilateralism is ridiculous. When push comes to shove, we have to act according to our principles in this case being applying the death penalty at a distance to one of our enemies. I think that strain of thinking is going to continue to provoke people around the world into having negative reactions toward the United States. Whether that remains at the level of public opinion, in other words, our reputation in the polls will remain low, as it remains low in much of the Muslim world, or whether it will take the form of active resistance toward the United States, either in theaters of operation, Afghanistan, Iraq, Yemen, or whether it takes the form of political opposition, economic opposition. It's hard to say, but I think that kind of response will complicate any kind of political advantages that the Obama administration derives from this act.
Well, thank you, Mr. Feffer, for speaking with me today.
It's been a pleasure to talk to you.